I'll say words. Let's get into what we could classify as facts. I'm mostly talking about resources, as I have been for most of the series. It is like fact adjacent in that these resources are real and in fact in their existence exist as facts because they exist.
Yeah, and the facts that they are needed exist.
Yeah, no, exactly. But as I said, this film at first was like, whoa, this is a lot. But I think it was really important. I know I kissed its butt a bunch already in saying how much I loved it. But it was just so fascinating on like multiple levels, like both on like a neurological standpoint of like neglect and how it influences the developing brain. And how it shapes the developing brain and how interpersonal relationships in early childhood are so important because when you are growing up, you don't have an understanding of the world. And if your only understanding of the world is like unloving, cold neglect, it makes it very hard to develop interpersonal relationships that aren't that. So it's just really interesting, like the way in which that was demonstrated throughout the film, as well as just like the importance of interpersonal relationships and like love and care for humans as they're developing instead of like this, you are wrong, I wish you weren't here. Like there's so much damage that does. And I think if anything, like I'm now processing this, but that also that's like kind of like not an allegory, it's just what happens. But like the way in which how important gender affirming care is in society, like when you are going through your identity search. And that to not even acknowledge the difference in a sense, like to not even acknowledge that they're who they see themselves to be by just totally ignoring them altogether. It kind of, you never see them because they haven't been that person that you imagine them to be. That was really interesting. That literally just occurred to me right now. And there was like lots of things in this film that I related to outside of like the serial murder and obsession with cars. Being a gender fluid human, there's definitely like things that like I was like, whoa, yeah, no, that was a great way to show that. And I think that's part of why I loved it so much. But the resources section for today, because of that, I kind of focused on a collection of LGBTQIA centered resources with some callbacks to resources found in our previous F the Patriarchy episodes. There are some sprinkles of intersectional feminism in there as well. And as I've said in previous episodes, if you know of any resources that you want me to add to these lists and share outs that we've been doing, send us an email at theghouls@gmail.com. We do read them, I promise. And it's happened a few times where someone's like has sent us a resource, not for these episodes, or actually it's like our dementia episode that gets like a lot of traction in the blogs. But we get a lot of emails being like, please include this resource. And we're like, heck yeah.
We just got one for for relationship abuse. So
they're great. Coming in. Yeah, so that's great. So if you do think of any, or you have one you use often, or if anything you think would be helpful within this category of resource sharing, let us know. So a lot of the resources that I'm going to talk about, I got from GLAAD, which is GLAAD stands for Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. So it's GLAAD is about rewriting the script for LGBTQ acceptance, is in a dynamic media force, and it tackles tough issues to shape the narrative and provoke dialogue that leads to cultural change. So they had a lot of resources on their website that ended up being in here. I kind of like worked them out so that you didn't have to go to a bunch of different links to find things. And instead you kind of had like a clear understanding of what was being shown. As we kind of said in our like vote, our abortion access resource share out, voting is something you can do, and tracking legislation is a part of that. There are a lot of anti-LGBTQIA legislation, anti-LGBT bills, anti-transgender legislation, school policy bills, youth healthcare bans, youth sports bans, etc., that are in process across the country. There's also pro-LGBTQ non-discrimination legislation that is in process. So the freedomforallamericans.org links to all of those legislation, and it kind of gives you a really easy way to search through what is being passed. So as we said in the previous episode, it's like you can slow the train by doing this. The goal is to deconstruct it altogether, but we can slow the train by fighting against these things, emailing our Congress people, protesting, being activists, etc. Like there are things you can do within that space. It's just ultimately so much can be done when it is within the system that already exists. I do recommend it though. It was really helpful in just kind of seeing what is happening right now. And it outlines it by state. So you can see, like, we live in Pennsylvania. So I can see that there are 2 bills in Pennsylvania specifically that are anti-transgender, and ways that I can have like talking points to call local legislators and be like, hey, let's not do this. So that was an interesting resource that I recommend checking out. There's a bunch of other ones. They also, on the freedomforallamericans.org, they do have protections and non-discrimination protections that they want to make sure anyone who cares to is able to secure these critical protections nationwide. And they kind of work to equip people with everything they need to know to be strong advocates. So there is a link for that as well, just their specific resource page. I also have the National Center for Transgender Equality, which advocates to change policies in society to increase understanding and acceptance of transgender people. They have resources as well on their website. There's specific legal resources. So there's the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Funds, which is committed to ending discrimination based upon gender identity and expression, and to achieve equality for transgender people through public education, test case litigation, direct legal services, and public policy experts. They have resources on their website specifically if you're seeking legal services or protections, especially in laws that are, or states specifically that are under attack. Legal resources will be very necessary and probably come in handy, especially if you're thinking of Texas. And I mean, of the many states that are doing this, but Texas specifically, that is pushing to have like parents who actually support their children with gender affirming care have those children taken from them. So legal services and stuff like that's an important resource to have. There's the Trans Agenda for Liberation. It's a community-led guide towards a world we deserve. There's the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, which also works to offer like legal services for free to self-determine gender identity and expression, regardless of income and race, and without facing harassment, discrimination, or violence. There's the Trans Women of Color Collective that centers on healing and restorative justice through development, empowerment, power, and most importantly, leading with love. The National Black Trans Advocacy Coalition, which works with communities in the US and across the globe to foster diversity, inclusion, and equality for all. And there is the Vision for Latin, Trans Latin Coalition, which is to amplify education and resources to promote the empowerment of trans leaders. It kind of continues on with this, but then I specifically wanted to highlight resources for youth, preteens, parents, caregivers. The Gender Spectrum host online groups for preteens, teens, and parents and caregivers, as well as other family members. Building community is really important when in situations like the world is now. So they do have like online safe groups. So in the Panini Press, or if you are in states that might not have these things locally, there is an online community that you might be able to find acceptance in. There's also in transequality.org, there's a section that kind of walks you through the one-stop hub for name and gender change information. So kind of how to update your name and gender on a like state and federal level, as well as like IDs and records. They were really extensive on this. I was looking they had both like within immigration papers, they had kind of anything you could think of in terms of like identity and records, you were able to walk you through that process. There's also up-to-date resources on transgender people's rights on the Know Your Rights section on transequality.org, which with the possibility of police enforcement of these awful laws, it is important to know your rights and like what you're able to fight against in terms of like arrests, etc. They also have a guide for getting your health care covered. So each state is going to have, if you're on Medicaid specifically, will have different rules for what is covered and what is not, as well as each insurance plan has different rules for what's covered and what's not. So they kind of go through the process of finding out that information based on like what your healthcare might be.
What a great website.
Oh, that's transequality.org, but healthcare coverage guide.
Yeah. That's just a great website that it has all of these resources. That's so cool.
I was like, what?
Oh, no.
Makes a lot more sense. Yeah, they had like so many. That's why, but that's why I wanted to link like specifically to the sections, because otherwise I feel like whenever I go on websites, I get really overwhelmed by like all the information. So sometimes I think it's like helpful to have like each thing, even if it repeats a bunch of times, that like you're able to find the specific page for where you're going. We shared this in the last one. It was just a zine. It's called Trans Day of Resilience, and it's a thing that shares art and poetry. So like a more positive resource that's just like celebrating trans identity and art. And they have ways that you can support them through donating, but they also like have the art and the zine and the poetry and everything on their website that you can download to read. So I recommend supporting that. There's also lots of organizations that just like support education and advocacy, specifically for transgender youth and families. There's also some workplace kind of support as well as employment opportunities. So Trans Tech's mission specifically to employ those facing barriers in education and in the workforce is transtechsocial.org. They offer, it seems like there are careers specifically that they make sure are available. But there's also, as I said, there's lots of websites that will go through legislation. Another one that I found is transathlete.com, specifically in like looking at like bans within elementary school, college, sports. They even had links for like the Olympics. So just like ways that you can kind of track what's happening nationwide to make sure that you're still able to fight these things and slow down the train, but also kind of just know what's happening. Because a lot of these horrible legislation pieces usually get snuck into other bills. It's just kind of good to know what happens. And then these people just like list it out for you. So you know exactly, even if it's not named in a way, even if it's named misleadingly, that makes it sound like it's a positive thing, you can actually see right away that it is anti-trans, so you know which ones to fight against. This last one that, it's not the last resource, but the last one in this little cluster, I thought was very important. It's called Transdo Task Force, and they specifically find and research cases of LGBTQIA plus missing and murdered persons, especially focusing on unidentified individuals who might have been transgender. They advise and educate the public, media, and forensic professionals about the needs and differences between Transdo cases and other DO cases. And they also assist law enforcement departments, medical examiners, and forensic anthropologists with getting their cases worked on by forensic genetic genealogists, and has a trans-led forensic genetic genealogist team in-house. So that's transdotaskforce.org. It just seemed like they were doing really important work. I've also linked the next resource in our previous share outs, specifically resources for transgender, genderqueer, non-binary, gender fluid, gender non-conforming, and every other non-cis identity within the trans umbrella, where you can apply for surgery funds, hormone replacement therapy funds, electrosis support fund, and free chest binders and free femme shapewear. And that's pointofpride.org. I list the specific links in our blog. So if you need like the specifics in terms of each individual tagline within the URL, you can find it on our blog online. But it's pointofpride.org if you wanted to just know it off of me talking to you. There's also resources for housing, Trans Housing Coalition Fund. They have a GoFundMe where you can support funding for trans youth and adults in housing issues. And there's also blackandpink.org that does this as well. And that is honestly it almost. I also have the PSU Online Classroom. We specifically linked this in our intersectional feminism section in our last episode, but this resource provides free reading material. It's just really helpful. There's lots of resources in there. There's lots of book recommendations, videos, etc. But they do provide like free links to these resources. So as I said in the last episode, like if you have the means to financially compensate the authors listed, please do so. If you don't, obviously learning is super important. So do what you gotta do. But if you have the means, don't just like take advantage of the free resource if you're able to provide funding to the people who worked really hard on creating these things. And the last one I have on here is resources for healthcare professionals serving intersectional women and gender non-conforming communities. So if you're listening to this and you work in healthcare and you're like, hey, I want to be better. I want to make sure that I don't traumatize people who come to me. I care about all my patients. I am not a horrible human being. You can check out bipopwomenshealthcenter.com/for-professionals. They have resources on how to do that within your workplace, specifically in the healthcare industry. And that's all I got for resources.
Awesome.
Not in life. I'm not done that,
Yeah. No, I think it's a great, it's such a complex like thing. Like there's so many aspects to it. Sometimes you're just not, like if you're not in that world, you don't think about what is needed. And I think the resource dump that you have here really helps like put that into context of like, oh, there's a lot of layers. There's a lot of things and there's a lot of resources because there's a lot of issues that we need to support. So
yeah, I try to make it a little bit of both. Like it was like, if you actually identify as this, you have resources that can help you. But if you don't, you can learn. And that's what I thought of in our like domestic violence resource share out. It was just like, you don't know when this could be necessary or relevant to you. It does not hurt you to learn about something. It just makes you know more about the world. And while that will never prepare you for some things, because sometimes no matter how much you prepare, you're like, it can't hurt to learn something that may make someone feel okay in the future and to have that happen. So even if you're like, I don't know if this is relevant for me, maybe look and maybe it is.
Yeah, I mean, this film kind of inspires this idea that the future is not genderless, but it'll be different than the way that we experience it now. And so might as well just get used to the fact that it's different and that you're going to have to think different to be able to do this.
And it's not like there's just suddenly so many more LGBTQIA people. They're making it up. It's like, no, actually, maybe the world has made it so unbelievably unsafe to exist authentically as yourself that no one up until this point felt safe enough telling you that that's who they were. And maybe that's why it didn't exist before for you. But that doesn't mean it didn't exist. It's been here the whole time. But now people are more open about it because we're creating safer or presumably are creating safer environments, trying to create safer environments so that people can not like hate themselves their whole lives.
What I was thinking when you were going over some of those resources was, remember when people were really upset when the Boy Scouts just became the Scouts? And I think about that because it's like, what about the Boy Scouts was gender specific? That is stuff that anyone can learn and should learn. Like, it's so bizarre. Like, what? Why are we so upset about that? Boys could also sell cookies. Like, what are we doing?
And it's really interesting the things that people get upset about and the ways in which it's really just influenced by indoctrination. If you just really think about from the second you were born, even before you were born, gender is so obsessed with, gender is so harped on. You have gender reveal parties that light fires in California and literally just burn half the like it's
And for what?
literally things for why. People
Cool.
are
Now we know the genitals
yeah, like
of your
patriarchal
child.
society is just so obsessed
It's
with
so weird,
gender
man.
and like what it has to mean instead of just existing as a human.
Yeah.
Um, even I was telling you earlier that like I for work was going through the CDC milestones for early childhood development, and for no reason, so much of it was just like they just threw her or he in there when it sounded just so weird, like it was grammatically incorrect or out of place. And it's like you could have just put they, like it would have changed nothing. Like if anything, it's more accurate now because milestones are not specific to what genitals you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You're a child developing, your brain is doing stuff. Why do you
Yeah.
why does it matter that you say he or she? It was really weird. It was really
In
weird.
less
So there's just
words, you can say he or she by saying they. That allows
yeah, you
you in
could say
less
both of them
words.
at the same time. It's more efficient. But yeah, there's just like this obsession where everything has to be gendered or everything can't be feminine. I think that's
Hmm.
also a super big piece.
Yeah, I think my favorite story about gender and like how ridiculous people get is just that this one time my sister posted a picture of her dog, who is a boy dog, but it was a little cold, so she put them in children's pajamas, and the pajamas that she had happened to be pink. And this person commented, it was like on Facebook, it was like, you put girl pajamas on a boy dog? And I was like, I promise you that he does not care. I promise you that dog has never thought about their gender, is not upset that they're in pink. Like like
Yeah.
what how
Color
small
isn't
is your
even
world?
gendered.
How
Like
small is your world?
but
It
that's
gets
yeah,
every time.
it
It
haunts
really
you. I
I
wonder
thought
if
it
they
was
think about it
hilarious.
still. Yeah.
I
I
do.
wonder if they
Sometimes
like
I'll just like, you put girl pajamas on a boy dog. I think that's so funny because it's a dog. Like that, my favorite. It's my favorite thing. I think
yeah.
about it all the time, and I'm like, wow, what a human that is. That even
Yeah.
exists and probably procreated. Like,
Yeah.
okay. Um,
Anything. Yeah.
um, so, what we will say is we highly recommend this film. It is one of our favorites now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Which is, I mean, says a lot. I would say I do like this one more than Raw. Raw was a little hard sometimes and made me very sad. Not
Yeah.
empowered in the least. Very depressing. But like I thought it was a really great story and it was very unique. But yeah. But this film, great. Definitely worth all of the praise that
Yeah.
it got. I'm so glad that we watched it. I'm so glad it's finishing out our F the Patriarchy series, so we can go forth and do another series and have fun with that. But please let us know what you think, if you've seen the film, what your thoughts are, how you feel about gender fluidity. If you like, if that's your experience, do these resources help? Those kinds of things, and
Yeah.
leave a message on our social medias, and just be cool, be
Yeah. I'm late to the gender fluidity
cool.
game, so if you know more than me, please tell me.
Yeah, we're
It
all
probably would help me
figuring that
even.
out.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm brand new to this, so if any more experienced gender fluid humans or trans humans are like, "Hey, I got you. Here are a bunch
Hmm.
of resources," and I'll be like, "Thank you. Now I know."
Yeah, I am empowered.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes the teacher wants to learn, and I will say, I just realized this, that the crew that watched this film are all slash theys.
Aw, I
So it's
love
just a
that.
little like we're all a little gender fluid, which I think is wonderful. Um, awesome. Well, go on figuring out how to love yourself in the ways
Yeah.
that you know, and figuring out how you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to look like, how you're supposed to feel, what makes you feel good. Keep loving technology. Don't like make love to technology, maybe, but you can still love it. Don't make I don't know,
Yeah.
like that was a I still can't figure out like the anatomy, like how
Of car.
how like was it a
Mhm.
gear shift? Is it emergency brake? Is there like what is
I almost just said something very inappropriate.
say it. Oh my god, say it.
Emergency brake would not do anything. That thing is skinny. It's long, but it's skinny. It's not doing anything.
You can have like one of the gear shifts that has like it's like a ball at the end.
That's okay. Sure. But
I don't know. I don't think it's really
all emergency brakes that I have seen in my life. I'm sure others exist. I'm not very familiar with cars, but the ones that I've witnessed
brake shame
are just long and skinny and would do nothing.
All sizes. Okay, it's about the motion of the automobile.
Okay,
and not the size of your emergency brake.
Well, no, it doesn't. Okay. It's length versus width. That's the problem.
I'll say they seem to enjoy the fire car more than the fire truck.
It's true.
The fire truck seemed a little more aggressive. All right, before we leave, if you were gonna have sex with a car, what kind of car would you have sex with?
I want you to answer.
That's a good question. I'll tell you what, probably not a pickup. Probably not a pickup truck. It feels a little too conservative. Yeah. A little too representative. And then I can think of a lot of cars I wouldn't have that with.
But I will say because more what no than what yes.
Yeah, like not a white van without any windows. Probably not one of those. Yeah. Probably not. Yeah, but my answer will be what I always answer for when people ask like what cars I like, because I don't know the breeds of cars. I don't know that. I can't keep track of those. But there's one car that I know and I can always identify it, and it's because it has very specific handles, and because it was in this full circle, Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift. Was Nissan 350Z, and it's the only car that I can identify, and it's also really fast, and they always look really cool, and it can like maneuver and stuff, and it's the only car I would ever be excited to have. And also, I'll just say that I'll just come around full circle.
I don't know what kind of car it would be, but I know it would be a hybrid because it cares about the environment, but also would survive the apocalypse.
That's really good.
You can still put gas in it if you need to. But it functions on electricity, so it doesn't hurt the planet as bad.
I love this. I love this for us. And tell us what car you would have sex with. What vehicle? Yeah. It could be a plane. It could be a boat. It could be a yacht. It could be a cruise ship.
Honestly, I'm really happy this is how we ended the episode. It's so much happier than it could have been. Because my end was like, don't get married, delete your kids, and never... don't have them because the world is awful.
Because the world sucks.
Yeah. Or if you're gonna, don't let them eat them. Let them be their best selves and be whoever they are. But I like how we ended it. If don't get married unless it's to a car, and if so, what car would that be? Must tell us.
Okay, bye.